What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. Do you struggle facing challenges and difficulties in life? Do you feel like you just can't get to the next stage or overcome what you're facing? Well, you're in luck because today we're going to talk about how to face difficulties. I'm Danny, everybody. Randy, what's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Have you ever faced like really hard challenges in life that you just can't don't know what to do?
On a regular basis, so I've been facing a lot of challenges recently, difficulties, whatever you want to call them. And one of them in particular really like got under my skin. This was an interaction with a person, just like really got under my skin. And the worst part was not that it got under my skin, but that I got so triggered by it. Like I was pissed off at myself because I
I
got
hate
triggered
that.
by this, because it was something that was so unimportant. Like if it was something that was, this is a really important thing in my life, I should care about this, I would be like, okay, justifiably. But this is something that's like really doesn't matter at all. This person, like, clearly mentally unstable. Why am I getting so freaking triggered? And I just like was next level pissed off. And so like I started reading this book again because of this getting triggered. I started reading this book again, something about like F star CK. I don't remember what the title was.
It's always that.
There's
Yeah.
a billion of those books out, but it was the one that started the whole trend. And so
Ah,
yeah, and so I was reading that. An interesting note in that book, he does say a lot of very interesting things in there. If you haven't read it, just read the first chapter. Uh, it's a subtle art of not giving it,
oh, that's right.
that one. Yeah.
I thought it was how to un-F your life or whatever.
No, that was the second
No,
one.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
And
Okay.
so basically, he said that the mind, if it doesn't have problems, will create them. And I have
Yeah.
noticed this without my life because, like, even though I know logically it doesn't work, my mind keeps trying to make a problem free life. And I'll get there for like a
Hmm.
day or 2 days or 3 days. And then I'll be like, I finally made it happily ever after. And then problems, So,
Do you know what? Well, no, it's funny though, because I do. I experienced that like fairly regularly, where like I, you know, nothing's necessarily wrong, like at all, in like my day, my life, whatever. But like I'll just get like down or depressed or something, and it's almost worse because I don't have anything to like pinpoint, like that's what it was, and so then I just spin out all of, like any kind of idea or possibility, and then it just spirals into negativity. And the work, what I hate the most, I think it's the same as like what you were saying with like being triggered, is like I usually, by the time I recognize it, I just get more mad at myself for letting it go on for like hours or days, because you just ruin, all that time. You just
yeah.
make it about this miserable thing instead of like, whatever.
Yeah.
And I
So
mean, life's hard too. It's like, it's gonna be challenges. There's gonna be things like it's not easy.
yeah, and it can be insanely frustrating, especially when you get angry at yourself about it, because it's human nature. It's going to happen.
Oh
Like
yeah.
guaranteed you're gonna have problems.
Oh, you know what I hate too? It's like every time I get angry too at myself, it's like then I start thinking like, oh, if only I made this decision 20 years ago, or if only I'd done that. And it's like, which is dumb because then my life would definitely not be the way it is. And who the hell knows what it would be like? So like I
Yeah.
can't say that because I have no basis. It's like hindsight, it doesn't work.
Isn't it
Or I might
funny
not.
how often we
Yeah.
spend arguing with the past or with the future as if we could change it?
What cracks me up too is like, and if you made those changes, everything would change, which means a lot of things you actually appreciate in your life would probably be gone. They probably wouldn't be there. So then, like, would you really still want that life? Because it might be lacking things that really matter to you. Like, you can't know all the consequences
Hmm.
of those changes.
Yeah. It can be really monumental to try and like figure out what exactly would happen. So like I know we've talked about this a whole lot, but I came in second place in a spelling bee in second grade. And this was like a life-defining moment for me because it basically said I'm not good enough. Like
Because you made
that's
it
what
one.
that's what I made it mean. In second grade, I don't know how old I was, but because I didn't come in first place, all of a sudden I was not good enough. And so like my pretty much my whole life until this year, that was a life defining moment. And then this year I started like walking back the cat or whatever that saying is and being like, hang on, does that actually mean anything? Well, no, I did better than third place than pretty much the other 28 people who did it. But also I had this imagination that like clearly not true, but like had I have come in first place, then I would be a real winner in life. And so I tracked down the person who came in first place and looked at what they're doing. And it was awesome. Like here, my whole life, I thought that if I had come in first place, like if I could change the past, come in first place, my life, all my problems would be gone. It would just be like rainbows, unicorn, all this stuff. I track
Yeah,
him down and
great.
I'm like, man, my life is so much better than his. This is awesome. I'm so happy that I came in second place because this was awesome. So it can be
Yeah.
worthwhile to figure out like exactly what would happen if your fantasy came true.
But you know what it is though? The imagination does that all the time. It's like it's the fallacy of like cherry picking. Like where we will look at other people's lives or we'll look at the past and we make it out to be like, oh, this one thing. That's why they're so much better than me, or that's how like my life would have changed. But we don't accept the fact that it comes with all this other stuff. You know, somebody else's wealth might come with a lot of burden also, like workaholic and never, seeing else and sleeping at Twitter, for instance, or something like that. Or, like looking a certain way may come with a lot of consequences that you don't really know about. So it's like I think it's easy to like look outside and find things that we would want, and imagine how great it would be, but we don't really understand it fully. So I think that
Mhm.
is a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually looking, you have a clear example there
Dude,
of
okay,
like,
so
you know,
here's another example. So I have this friend who made a lot of money. Like a lot of money. Like this is basically everybody's fantasy how much money this guy made. And this dude changed so much. He can't trust anybody. Like
yeah,
literally his first thought when he meets somebody is what do they want from me?
yeah.
Why are they trying to F me over? And like I see it completely every time I meet him now because he like literally is desperate for an actual relationship with somebody and he can't trust anybody.
Well, dude, think about it though. It's like they get used to people calling them for money, entourages and hangers on. Everybody wants to talk to them because they don't really give a shit about that, and they want their money, right? The politicians are happy to open the door for these people because they want them to give them money for something. So it's like, yeah, who can you trust? And then you don't know because everybody's out scamming people, and you have a lot. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But
pretty
that's a
crazy.
whole, it is funny what we imagine though things would be like. And it makes
Mm-hmm.
things so difficult because we make it so hard to see what we have now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude. I mean, every time I think my life sucks, it's usually because I'm not appreciating what there is now.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
this morning I was making coffee and I was just looking around and I was just like, oh my gosh, I have this, I have this, there's this. Oh my gosh, there's this. And I was just like, man, could you create a better life? This is just awesome.
Yeah, that is, it's I don't remember where I heard that from, but it is really helpful to just look around and literally point out the things that you're happy you have now
That was from me.
in your life. Was it from
I said that like 6 months or a year ago. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there you
Because
go.
I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense. We spend
Yeah,
our whole life curating our life. We buy the things that we want or that we think other people would admire if we had, and we get rid of things that we don't like. So we spend our whole life creating this environment that we like. But then our brain, when it sees stuff on a regular basis, it forgets it's there. Like it's just gone. So if we actually take time to look around and see the things, we're like, whoa, like this is exactly what I dreamed about 6 months, a year ago, 5 years ago. Like it's here. But we're just so focused, future
yeah,
oriented, looking at the new things that we want that we completely miss all the stuff that we've worked for the past however long.
yeah. We take things for granted like really fast. It is amazing. The
Mm-hmm.
other the other thing too, I think that's bad is like we you have to get clear about the real level at which something matters. When you face difficulties, because I know this for myself, like if you're caught up in something, it's easy to overblow it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you think that like it might outweigh everything else in your life, when in reality, it's like maybe not as important as you think. And
Mm-hmm.
it's important to check yourself because like, you see these people that like, get so stressed out about work and about like messing something up or like school or whatever. Like they're so stressed out about getting A's or something like that. And they don't hang out with people, they don't see people because they're worried, working. And it's like, does it matter that much? Does it really make that much of a difference? And actually asking yourself that too, I think can be super helpful because I know I have that problem and like you can get caught up in it and it can totally like derail you for, well, for your whole life, actually, in some cases, but like for a long time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. You got to remember that you're going to die and you're going to be on your deathbed one
Yeah.
day looking back and being like, why was I so concerned about going to work every day? Like I
Yeah.
missed out on everything. Uh, yeah, that's a huge one
It's fun.
because we're
Well,
we're all going to die every day we're getting closer, one day at a time.
yeah, I think that's one of the things like it's funny, but like all these philosophers talk about, and I think that's like one of the most important things is just appreciating the fact that life's short and you have one chance. It's like asking yourself seriously, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Is this
Hmm.
what I want? Is this really matter? This is, if I only have one chance, would I do it this way?
Yeah,
It's a great way to kind of like reset.
yeah. And there's this motivational video that I listen to on a pretty regular basis that starts with, if you only had 6 months left to live, what would you do differently? And like every time I hear that, I'm just like, I imagine if I only had six
Yeah,
months, what would I do? Because in reality, we all only have 6 months or less. You know,
yeah,
who's to say we have any longer? Like to think that you do is just an illusion because we could all die today. And so it really brings into focus the important things in life. Because we were talking a couple of weeks ago about this one dude who I was doing something that was on his bucket list. And
oh yeah,
here's like
yeah,
an 80-year-old guy. This thing is what happens once a year. This is on his bucket list. He tells me it's on his bucket list. I was like, well, come do it this time. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not going to do it this time. And I'm like, dude, you're freaking 80. Like, you're running out of years. It's not going to be around that long. And so, uh, yeah,
oh,
because it's that whole concept of like, you better start living your life now because it's going to disappear.
that's my favorite too. Because if you have a long bucket list and you've had it for like years or decades, like, do you even still want to do that stuff?
Yeah.
How,
Yeah.
you even like it now because your interests might have changed or like whatever, like things change, you might not even want it, you might be, who knows, it's going
Hmm.
to be a lot harder because you're older, who knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
It is
One,
funny. I Oh, good. I
well,
was
one
gonna
thing
say,
I
I
just
remember.
wanted to touch on, I know, right? One thing I wanted to touch on. So, like, when I said look around your room and see things that you also enjoy, there was also this story about this guy who basically was a very, very wealthy CEO, and he was excellent at gratitude because he was like, "Oh, thank you so much for these cars. Thank you so much for these multiple relationships that I have. Thank you so much for this amazing house. Thank you so much for this business." And then COVID hit, and he lost it all. And then gratitude was
Yeah.
really difficult because all this stuff he was grateful for disappeared. So, in addition to looking around your room, also look at yourself and see the person that you've become. So, like for me, what I like to do is I look back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, see who I was then, see who I am now, look at the skills I've developed, look at the person that I've become, and be grateful for those things as well, because those things will never leave you. The
Yeah.
yeah, the material things, yeah, they could be gone tomorrow, but the actual person you became in obtaining them or working towards them, that'll never leave you.
Yeah, self comparisons are like the best because like that is, you really do see the change and you also see going in the right direction. Yeah, which you can't see when you're just looking at like material stuff because
Mhm.
it does, it changes. I mean, a new iPhone's going to come out, right? A new thing's going to, whatever the hell is going to come out in the future that you're going to want. So it's
Yeah,
like,
or somebody could break into your house and steal all your stuff, or your house
yeah,
could burn
I mean,
down, and
or
the insurance company, your insurance
yeah,
lapsed the day before it happened. Like all that stuff is possible. So yeah.
or a pandemic happens, you lose everything, right? Like, who
Hmm.
knows what's going to happen? Nobody thought that was going to happen.
Hmm.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say, they're going back to the like thinking about the shortness of your life was like there's so many stories. I remember this teaching biomedical ethics too of people who get a terminal illness but make it and like totally changing their lives, like everything about their lives, you know, after they beat this illness because they realize all of a sudden like it's like a new life or a new lease on life or a second life or whatever. Like you'll hear stories of people just traveling or like quitting a job they hated and doing something completely different so they can spend more time with their friends and family, but like you start to see what's really actually important because they realize like, oh, I took for granted I had all this time and I took for granted all these people in my life and just kept doing this thing day in and day out, not thinking that like it could end. And then then what? Am I really going to be happy with who I am and what I became when it's over?
Hmm. Yeah, that's an eye opener because when you're given a second chance at life, you better take hold of it.
It is funny though, because I think it is really hard to do unless you have a situation like that. Because like you can imagine it, but it's not quite the same as like actually facing it. And I think you have to like, so I think you can imagine, I think you can like do things like journaling and stuff can help you get there. But it is, you have to work, you have to put work in to get there to see it that way.
Yeah. I I can look back at my life. So like there was this TED talk from I don't know, probably a decade ago called Hardwired Happiness. And
Back when they
basically,
were like good.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
They got
And
so
yeah, now
yeah.
anybody yeah. So this was something where the gist of the TED talk was, like what do you need to be happy? Everybody has this mental model. I need to be this, do this, have this in order to be happy. And it's like anything you can be, do, or have, you can also lose it. So
Yeah.
if this can get you happiness, you can also lose this. And so where are you then? And eventually towards the end of the thing, and he goes into, I would recommend watching this. It's 15 minutes. But for me, it was very impactful. And he goes into like what actually creates a life of happiness, joy, things like that. And what it came down to was, I forget, but hardwired happiness.
Nice.
I forget where I was going with it. But anyways, anything you can get, you can unget. And
Was
oh,
this
and
was
so
this
he get
character
he
and
get
stuff? Is that what you're talking about? That one?
so nah. So
Uh,
he gets down to the part where basically, if you're living life the way that you should be living it, pretty much every day, you should just be like sinking to your knees in gratitude at this like unbelievable opportunity that you have. And when I watched it 10 plus years ago, whatever it was, I was like, no freaking way, not possible. Like, because I was living this life that I hated. I was doing this stuff
yeah.
that I hated. I thought I had to do it, and I absolutely hated it. And I was like, not possible. There's no freaking way. I need to be this, do this, have this in order to be happy. There's no freaking way. And so over the time, just working on self development, different things like that, changing my life direction to actually do things that I wanted to do, and clearing up the messes of my past, that as well. And
It's helpful.
now on a regular basis, not every day, because some days still suck, but on a regular
Yeah.
basis, I'm just like sinking to my knees in gratitude. Like, oh my goodness, what an opportunity to do this. This is insane. And it's just like, I would challenge people that if your life isn't like that, start working to create it because it's possible.
You know what's funny? I remember that reminds me of when I early on I like first read Nietzsche. He's like a compatibilist with fatalism,
Mm,
and freedom. And he makes a claim that I'll just summarize basically, but like if you're like living the way you should, like you do what you're supposed to do. So it's almost like instinct. Like every choice you make is right for you. So it's not a choice, if that makes sense. I know it's kind of weird.
mm-hmm,
Sounds contradictory, but yeah. And like I remember when I first read that, I was like, nah, it doesn't make any sense. Like, so is it just controlled or whatever? And then as I got older, I started to realize like, no, that makes perfect because that's like an authentic life, truly, right? Like where everything you do is what you ought to do because of who you are, right? You're not making any choices contrary to your will. So you're not doing things because somebody told you to, or because of expectations, or because of social pressures or norms or whatever. And it's like when you think about that, it's like it's a high bar, but it's really like what we should be aspiring to, rather
yeah,
than listening to all the bullshit and talking heads and stuff and everything else that pressures us to conform a certain way. We should be doing, what we ought to do, right? Like who we are.
yeah, that's a really great one. Like I can kind of see the resonance in that with what was talked about in the Tao Te Ching, like,
Oh yeah,
and also Marcus Aurelius. He talked about it's the job of the dog to be the dog. It's the job of the human to be the human. And and the Tao Te Ching was like to do,
going with the flow of the universe,
yeah,
right? And like
yeah,
not being against it, not yeah.
yeah. If there's nothing you do, there's nothing you left undone, something like that. And so yeah, I can totally see that because you just like I look at it this way. The Industrial Revolution kind of messed up humanity. you
Oh
know,
yeah.
just a bit, because we basically took everybody with all these different skills and we wanted them to do one thing. And we're still stuck in the after effects of the Industrial Revolution. Like people are like, oh, I'm an engineer. Oh, I'm a school teacher. Oh, I'm a nurse. Oh, and it's like you're really just working a job that generally you thought you might like
It's
when you were a kid.
specialization.
And yeah. And
Yeah.
so we miss out on all of our unique talents. And so, kind of as like an exercise I like to do is like, if all of my needs were provided for, if I had all the money I needed, all the food I needed, all the love I needed, all the everything that I needed, like what would I actually do? And then
Yeah.
get doing that, because that's probably what your what what your insides are screaming out to you to actually go and do.
Yeah. And it's really hard. It is really hard to break those like blinders that you have on from your socialization and culture and everything you see all the time. Like it is really difficult to like get down to who you are versus like what everyone wants you to be or what society wants you to be. And specialization is a big part of it, I think, because you don't even have a framework to understand what you might be good at because you don't know. You haven't even experienced anything
Mm-hmm.
other than like one thing.
Yeah.
And it's like you make that choice when you're so young that it really doesn't, it's not helpful.
And
Yeah,
it could be the thing that you're absolutely terrified of. Like
probably
for
is.
yeah, it's like for me, I knew what like there's this saying, I hope you live long enough to find out the reason why you were born. And I think like now in my 40s, I'm just discovering the reason that I was born. Like it took that long of all these quote unquote failed attempts. But it's like the thing that I'm doing is the thing that was the most fear inducing thing for me, because it was what I always wanted to do, but I was always terrified that I wasn't going to be able to do it. Like I literally thought that you had to be some other type of higher level human being in order to accomplish this thing. And
Yeah,
and then just like once I got into it, the more I learned about it, the more scared I got. And but I was just like, I had tried a whole bunch of other stuff and a whole bunch of other stuff didn't work. And I was like, well, I've literally known this is like the kid who wants to be an astronaut, and then you're like, oh, well, that's not a reasonable thing to do. Or the kid who wants to be a president. It's like, well, that's not a reasonable thing to do. And it's like, well, maybe it is. Because
yeah.
if that's really your dream, like if that's really from when I was a kid, I knew this was what I wanted to do. But my whole entire life, I convinced myself it wasn't possible. And then I stepped into
But
it and it was terrifying. And now it's getting more and more possible every day.
that's just it, though, right? It does. It gets more and more possible because there's no reason why you can't do it if you want to do it. That's the crazy part. But we convince ourselves that we can't. And I think that's the biggest burden is like, well, the biggest burden is ourselves. It's our own like fears and limitations that we present to ourselves, and then our own like interpretation that's a lot of the time fed to us by others that restricts our options. And I think it's the hardest thing you got to break out of. But once you break out of that, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing so the actual reason that this episode idea on
Oh yeah,
problems and life challenges, I know, what the heck are we actually talking about today?
I
So
forgot.
I, again, age is like, age solves everything except for like mortality, like the whole mortality type thing. But pretty much every other
Sounds a lot of
problem,
other problems.
everything else, you're good. So like uh with age, I have noticed that problems, challenges, all this stuff, they're uncomfortable, they suck, I want to get rid of them as soon as possible, but they're always good for me. And that's something the past year has been like a
Yeah.
major realization for me, because I look back in my life, the worst problems I ever had were the times when I needed to make the biggest changes in my life that set me in the right direction. And so now, regularly, when problems come up, I get frustrated as heck. I get angry at myself. I get angry at the world. I curse everything. And then I'm like, this is probably good for me.
And you face it, right? Yeah. And I think they do get easier to face because you realize that connection. Like, and I think, I agree with you. When I was younger, I think you turn away from things, you distract yourself, you hide, you justify doing what you've always done, whatever, instead of actually just doing that thing that would make it better and actually facing it. So yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird too how I wish it happened. Yeah, it would be great if people were taught this when they were little, and then they just had that information, and
Some things there's the only way to do it is experientially. Like I
that's
I'm
most things.
yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure if somebody told me when I was young, the only way you're gonna be happy is by making a bunch of mistakes and you just have to get older, I would be like, mm-mm, no, I
You're
know
an
the
idiot.
answer. Yeah.
Yeah,
The answer is make lots of money, be an Instagram
that's
star. That's it. Yeah.
it. I don't need your help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that's good. That's
Okay.
good. I hope
Actually, you
this.
were
Yeah,
introducing, not me.
was I? Oh
What am
yeah,
I
yeah.
doing? Yeah.
I don't know. Just taking charge, man. Go for it. So, anyway, hope that helps you guys face your difficulties. Check us out on YouTube. Listen wherever you get your podcast. Please like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. We'll be back later this week with a quick fix. But until then, later, Andy.
Later, Danny.